So, hello and welcome. For those of you who have been already in my former session this morning on SD-WAN, for those of you new, my name is Yves Sandfort, CEO of the Comdivision Group, and with me is Sascha.
Yes, I'm Sascha Schwunk, partner at Comdivision, and working with the whole stack of VMware, but focused on SD-WAN network, cloud provider, and the tons of stuff.
So, let's quickly go over what does Comdivision do real quick. This shouldn't be a big marketing game. So how we approach any kind of project is typically we start off with the architecture piece, then somehow the clicker doesn't work. Let's work without it. We start off with the architecture piece, build more or less the design for the infrastructure. Then there is typically an education piece, training people on how things are going to be done. And then there is an operational piece. So every one of our customers can basically pick and choose whether they want to actually operate everything by themselves, they want to have us as just a support resource, or if we can take over some of the services from a managed service perspective. But we are not here to talk about that so much. We are more here to talk about the SD-WAN use case and why are companies more and more moving into the SD-WAN world and actually move away from, let's say, the legacy MPLS, fiber links, etc. So we have, for example, a customer with us here this week as well, which is Vika, which deployed it now at over 40 sites globally. When we look at the challenges we have in most corporations nowadays is we have to solve different access layers. So one of them is connecting our head office with the individual offices. We have different branch offices we need to connect. But there are basically two use cases which are growing over the last 2 years. The challenge is that more and more companies are also moving into the public cloud. So I do not only need to solve the connectivity between my sites, but all of a sudden I need to figure out how I solve connectivity into the public cloud. Not every company is always big enough to have a direct connect or express route or however you want to call it by the different service providers. And so those are scenarios where SD-WAN comes into play. And workloads are shifting. So something where you need bandwidth today in one site, but might be somewhere else tomorrow. There is a fourth use case, which was basically also presented by VMware this week, that we will finally now get an SD-WAN VPN user interface as well. So that allows us to not only use SD-WAN between company branches and everything else, but we can also use SD-WAN for the actual VPN user. So everybody running around with their notebook or even in the future mobile devices can actually be integrated into the VPN infrastructure. The advantage here is now that it doesn't matter where the user is. So if I'm, for example, traveling in 2 weeks to the US, I can actually use my SD-WAN VPN to connect to the next VPN hub within the US based on the SD-WAN infrastructure.
And another point here is that not all our data are located on the headquarter data center like for 5 or 10 years ago. We are working with different data centers. We are working with multi-cloud solutions, multi-cloud environments. We have data at the hyperscalers, for example, Microsoft with the Office 365. And so it's important to find for every customer, for every solution, the best way to go to the data. So it's very important that we not have to go over the headquarter. So when we talk with customers who are working with MPLS, for example, all the connections goes to the headquarter, goes to the firewall in the headquarter, and then back out and go to Office 365. And with SD-WAN, we have a solution. We can find the best way for all of this data and solutions to go the direct way where the data are located and where I need to work.
And it actually, on top of that, it optimizes more or less itself continuously. So even if today the direct route might be the best way, it could actually be that tomorrow morning someone digs through an ocean cable or something else, and SD-WAN can automatically reroute. We had an example, we covered that this morning in the customer success story, is where the customer actually deployed SD-WAN in Singapore, and just by using SD-WAN in contrast to their VPN routes, basically reduced reduce the overall latency by 50 to 80 milliseconds. Because the advantage was now SD-WAN could connect to the orchestrator or to the gateways down in Singapore, use the direct link from Singapore to Frankfurt, which the customer didn't install because they just are leveraging the VMware backbone from that perspective and can actually work on from there. So there are tons of different scenarios on how to solve this. And if you look at it, also as more and more companies are going into the multi-cloud world, there is not one cloud. Most customers which we have at the moment have very often an Azure cloud and an AWS or an Azure and a GCVE or something else. So companies are moving into multiple clouds, and all of this is actually more and more challenging for these companies because I don't want to have a direct link to each one of them. I can clearly work with link providers and try to solve it that way, but the easier way in many cases is using SD-WAN because I might even have some workloads in a smaller service provider, like what was mentioned in the session before. We have in the VMware space just over 4,000 service providers in the first place. Not all of them offer direct links or MPLS from that perspective.
Yes, and what is interesting here, we can see it here on the slide. We have the branch office, for example, and then we can use all the connections we have to connect to the internet over the SD-WAN solution. So we go out, use all our internet connections that we have, and then on the SD-WAN we go out, for example, AWS, every co-locations, Office 365 and so, and that is a very important point. And also, if one lane is broken, so for example, or I have high latencies on some lanes, so we have a solution for this to go on, and my session is not dropped because I go with all of these sessions with the overlay. And when we go to the next slide, we can take a deeper look here. This is an example from a customer. They have 4 lanes. They use PlusNet, Vodafone in Germany, a Starlink connection, and a Vodafone Unity meter. It's a cable connection. And you can see here, we have some outages here on different cables. But overall, we can use the SD-WAN enhancement. So we have a 10-point, so a full quality score of our connections to the internet, to the connections in the headquarters, to the other branch offices, and to the hyperscalers.
And when you compare this to, let's say, a normal VPN connection, clearly you can set up a VPN connection over 4 links. But the challenge you have there very often is that one of the VPN connections drops, you need to reconnect, and depending on what type of applications you have, even those 1 second, maybe some only millisecond, failover times might even be too long. And the good part, especially when we talk about things like SD-WAN, it is far more enhanced to automatically optimize the traffic from that perspective, which is why we have Starlink here, and we have Starlink, for example, in many customer scenarios as well, because it's very cost effective to have a secondary link which is completely independent from everything else. When we talk about the current times where we have discussion around potential blackouts, whether they will come or not, Starlink can be quite attractive for companies as well, because even if you have an diesel aggregator or anything else, most carriers can only survive 12 to 24 hours network outages, then their network is gone. And so from that perspective, having something like a satellite uplink and stuff like that can keep you as a company up and running. Combine that with things like the VPN clients and things like that, allows your employees, if they have any kind of internet connectivity, still actually access any of the corporate data. So it actually solves that, and it is actually not complex from an implementation perspective, because most of the complexity is abstracted away really by VMware providing the orchestrator and all these services. You can clearly host all of that yourself as well, but the advantage really of using the VMware orchestration layer and the VMware gateways is that you have gateways in a lot of the SaaS applications already. So for example, when we started implementing SD-WAN for ourselves nearly 3 years ago, we could immediately see a massive improvement in Zoom, because all of a sudden we had more or less direct links into them. So All of these things are making it a lot easier, and it really doesn't matter for the solution what you are using as the underlying technology. You can still use your private MPLS links and all of that. You can actually use any internet broadband, you can use LTE, 5G, satellite uplinks and all of that. It really gives you the advantage to do that, and as VMware now moves more and more into this integration aspect, where we have integrations with VPN, with Workspace ONE and all of that, we are now taking really this SD-WAN approach from really just head-to-head corporate connectivity down to the end-user level and solve that piece out of it. So, we have 1 minute 50 left.
Yeah.
No, so overall, we think it's quite a clever solution. The advantage we see is not only that it actually works for large corporations. We have proven this now several times, even with customers with sometimes 2 or 3 sites, that they could dramatically drive their operational overhead for operating all their VPN links and everything down. And especially if you are thinking about moving your company into a multi-cloud scenario where you have different clouds and different solutions, this can become quite handy, because as a smaller company, you potentially don't want to build 1G or 10G uplinks into every of the public clouds to solve your problems.
Okay, and if you have questions, we are here a few minutes and just came to us. And
we shouldn't do any Q&A, we were told. So reach out to us. There are a few colleagues of us back there as well, or ping us on any of the social media channels. And thank you for being here, and have a remainder good show.
Have a nice day.